Hey guys, and welcome. We've now officially completed 4 weeks of lockdown. At least that's the situation here in the UK, and I'm sure it's pretty similar for you too. Wherever you are, I hope you're doing safe and you and your loved ones are well. And just like you, this lockdown has meant that I've also had quite a bit of free time. And what do people do when they have a lot of time on their hands? Conspiracy theories. And we've had so many. There's been conspiracy theories coming from the east. We've had conspiracy theories from the north. We've had it from the west, south, everywhere. It's just swirling in this big, giant, confusing orb of theories. I've already done a video talking about some initial conspiracy theories that I heard, but that was a few weeks ago. Now we're 4 weeks into this, and the main one that I've heard that a viewer got in contact with me about was this thing to do with Bill Gates. I will admit that I did hear all about this some weeks back, but I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I heard something about a TED Talk and about how supposedly Bill Gates predicted that this was going to happen, and now that's led to some people thinking that there's a giant conspiracy about coronavirus, about vaccines. Essentially, it seems like some megalomaniac somewhere is planning to take over the world, and Bill Gates seems to fit that mold. That's what they're saying anyway. So what I've done is I've managed to dig up that TED Talk which Bill Gates gave, and we're going to do a watch along, and I'm going to react to the TED Talk and also just give my own opinion about the current situation and these conspiracy theories. So keep watching. By the way, if you are new to my channel and you've never seen me before or don't know who I am, my name is Dr. K and I'm a GP or a primary care physician based in London, UK. My channel is educational, it's informative, and also a little bit entertaining, I hope. And the main idea is just to give a lot of health information, talk about different topics from skincare all the way to things like mental health, and it's really so that you can go away feeling better informed, knowing what to do when it comes to your own healthcare issues. If that's something that you'd be interested in, then keep watching, and why not consider subscribing? If you are a regular here and you've already subscribed, then 2 thumbs up. And let's crack on to this video. I will say though, before I do start watching this video, that I don't have any preconceived ideas. I've never seen the clip before. I do know of Bill Gates, and I know of the Bill and the Melinda Gates Foundation and the work that they do across the world, but pretty much that's all the knowledge that I have. So I'm watching this with a fresh pair of eyes. So that's the quick disclaimer done.
When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this.
So already we're onto a very good start. He's clearly a very accomplished person, good at public speaking, and I like the way he came in with that barrel with what seemed like radioactive material. What he mentioned about this fear of a nuclear war, I know for a lot of us nowadays, we weren't born during that time. Most of us are, either millennials, Gen Z, whatever else, and we don't have first-hand knowledge of what it was like to live during that time. But when you kind of go back and you watch a few documentaries, which you now have the time, so why not? Or you read a few books, you realize that it was such a big deal. The Cuban Missile Crisis, and this whole idea that the world was going to end because of countries like America, Cuba, the Soviet Union fighting over some conflict or other, and we all had to be prepared. So I totally understand what he's trying to say. So I understand what he's trying to say. So that was a very real thing for people in those times, dealing with that prospect that somebody could just press the button somewhere and let off this missile. This idea of a nuclear war is obviously ricocheted and had a lot of widespread impact into pop culture, because we've had lots of TV shows, books written about this whole concept of nuclear war. Things like War of the Worlds, which was written by H.G. Wells. We've had the Thunderbirds. And if you watch any common TV show in that era, it was such a big issue. So for him, I can see the background to his talk. However, though, obviously we're now watching it with 2020 hindsight, but this was filmed in 2015. And him mentioning that we had more to fear from a biological weapon than a nuclear weapon was, I can imagine, very controversial.
In the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
Isn't it strange, though, and actually a little bit freaky, that the picture of the virus that he put on the screen is very similar to the pictures that we see of coronavirus. It is some kind of weird Twilight Zone occurrence. So let's keep watching.
Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence. But we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic.
Honestly, it's like Bill Gates is some kind of soothsayer or some kind of oracle. We are not ready. We are not ready for the next epidemic. And here we are. Time has shown this to be 100% true. I can't argue with this.
Let's look at Ebola. I'm sure all of you read about it in the newspaper. Lots of tough challenges. I followed it carefully through the case analysis tools we use to track polio eradication. And as you look at what went on, the problem wasn't that there was a system that didn't work well enough. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to go. We didn't have a way of preparing people. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières did a great job orchestrating volunteers, but even so, we were far slower than we should have been getting the thousands of workers into these countries. And a large epidemic would require us to have hundreds of thousands of workers. There was no one there to look at treatment approaches.
So I'm trying to put myself back into the time frame when he was recording this TED Talk. And this was in 2015, during and just immediately after the whole Ebola crisis, which was going on in West Africa. And Bill Gates is somebody which, from his talk so far, seems like a very analytical person, and he's clearly done quite a bit of research into what happened during the Ebola crisis. What he talks about, and one of the key things that I do agree with him on, is about the fact that there wasn't a lot of statistics and early response to Ebola, which allowed it to spread. One of the key things that he talked about was the lack of epidemiologists or epidemiologists that were able to go in and accurately study the characteristics of Ebola. And I believe that as well, because with any new virus or any new illness, until we know about it, until we have data or information about it, we're pretty much working in the dark. We don't know how quickly it spreads. We don't know what kind of people are most vulnerable. So we don't know what are the characteristics, how, what the time frame for the illness, time frame for recovery. All these things might seem quite inconsequential and quite, like, who's arguing over whether it's X or Y? But actually they have a really big impact on you and me, because the more information that these epidemiologists go and collect, the better informed that me as a medic, you as the general person on the street know, and we can tackle it in the right way. So that was one of the key things that he identified from the Ebola crisis, and again seems to have happened with coronavirus. So it's really a shame that we didn't seem to have learnt in the 4 years since the last infectious disease issue. We don't seem to have really made that much of a improvement.
I wanted to figure out what tools should be used. As an example, we could have taken the blood of survivors, processed it, and put that plasma back in people to protect them. But that was never tried. So there was a lot that was missing, and these things are really a global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about.
So I totally agree. The Ebola crisis was a global failure, and coronavirus is a global failure. The powers that be, public health agencies, they have failed. Our governments, they failed, and we need to hold them accountable for what's happened. And he goes on to mention about the WHO, the World Health Organization, and they've come under fire quite a lot and under a lot of scrutiny this week in particular. We've had recent news that the Trump administration, President Trump, has seized funding for the WHO. He's blaming them for the global catastrophe that's happened. I understand why he's putting the WHO under a microscope and observing what they've done, but I feel like that's a very simplistic way of just diverting blame, because all the governments, not just the WHO, are at fault, and they have a part to blame in this issue. The WHO is a global initiative. It's not associated with any government, and it's been in existence since 1948 as a means of just coordinating global health outreach initiatives. So it keeps monitoring on different outbreaks, and it's also like the leading point of reference that a lot of countries look to. But again, when we're talking about coronavirus, this is a very unique disease, and the way in which it spread was also very different. We know that it came from China, and there's a lot of concerns about the validity, how reliable the evidence and how reliable the information that China was giving us to begin with. So if your original source is not being reliable, and there's some questions about how quickly they were passing on that information, then what else can you expect? So that's what I have to say about that specific topic.
There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood. The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola. Let's look at the progression of Ebola over this year. About 10,000 people died, and nearly all were in the 3 West African countries. There's 3 reasons why it didn't spread more. The first is there was a lot of heroic work by the health workers. They found the people and they prevented more infections. The second is the nature of the virus. Ebola does not spread through the air. And by the time you're contagious, most people are so sick that they're bedridden. Third, it didn't get into many urban areas, and that was just luck. If it had gotten into a lot more urban areas, the case numbers would have been much larger. So next time, we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market.
Oh my God. I really feel like I am watching something out of the Twilight Zone. I can't believe how clever this man is, or how clever the team of scientists and doctors behind him to give him all this information, because obviously he doesn't work alone. How clever that they are, because it is a word for word prediction of what has happened. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Definitely. The main thing about Ebola that's limited the amount of damage and devastation that it caused was that, as he said, it was in very specific areas which were more rural, and it wasn't spread in the airborne route. And the impact of air travel is completely, I believe, one of the reasons why it also didn't spread, because the kind of people that were affected tended to live in rural areas. It wasn't in an urban town. People weren't traveling from one part of the country to another, or to other countries spreading the disease. That was how it was able to be limited. That's one of the things we didn't have with coronavirus. It is highly, highly, highly infectious. And I don't know if you remember, it wasn't even until it started to become more of an issue that people fully understood that it was able to be passed on from person to person. Initially, it was thought that it was from animals to humans, but the fact that it started to pass from person to person by the airborne route was a significant game changer, and it meant that we really underestimated the threat that this thing could cause.
The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system. We have the benefits of all the science and technology that we talk about here. We've got cell phones to get information from the public and get information out to them.
Okay, so yeah, he's mentioned a few trigger topics there. He mentioned bioterrorism, mentioned about use of cell phones, which ironically enough, some people now think the whole 5G technology is linked to the spread of coronavirus. What do I really think? Do I think there's any merit? I've tried over the last few weeks to just really think within myself and just find out as much information as possible and just weigh up whether it makes any logical sense. And for me, I don't. Do I think Bill Gates has some secret lab somewhere, and you know, the whole him mentioning about bioterrorism was him giving us a warning and he kind of was behind this? I think the reality is going to be rather less dramatic than that. I don't imagine Bill Gates to be some sort of a Bond villain, and I don't see the merit or the benefit for him in concocting such a thing. Also, the information that we do have about coronavirus, most of it actually came initially from China. And the reason why it came from China was obviously because that part of the world was where it was affected initially, and they had more time to study the genetic attributes of the virus and obviously pass on the information to other countries and governments so that they can take similar measures. I really, truly, I like to think the best of humankind. And some of you out there might say, well, Dr. K, you're being very naive. Fine, I'm naive. I think in all of history, we've not had that level of manipulation, pure evil, or just science that we're able to create new viruses out of thin air. And from what we know about coronavirus, it is a completely different and new thing. We don't know much about it. hence why we're stuck in this position. If we knew about it, if it was something similar, we would have been coming up with vaccines similar to what we do with the flu vaccines, treatments, all these things would be underway. As the current situation, we're still quite a bit of time behind. And this isn't because we know what to do and people are just sitting back waiting for people to die. It's because we don't have that knowledge. We don't have the vaccines. We don't have this yet. But it's going to take time for us to get to that level. And that's really my 2 cents about the whole bioterrorism issue.
We have satellite maps where we can see where people are and where they're moving. We have advances in biology that should dramatically change the turnaround time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen. So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness. The best lessons, I think, on how to get prepared are, again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check, are people well trained? Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go. So those are the kinds of things we need to deal with an epidemic. What are the key pieces? First is we need strong health systems in poor countries. That's where mothers can give birth safely, kids can get all their vaccines, but also where we'll see the outbreak very early on. We need a medical reserve corps, lots of people who've got the training and background who are ready to go with the expertise. And then we need to pair those medical people with the military, taking advantage of the military's ability to move fast, do logistics, and secure areas. We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games, so that we see where the holes are. The last time a germ game was done in the United States was back in 2001, and it didn't go so well.
Okay, so now he's talking about what can we do to prevent the next epidemic. A lot of the things that he seems to be focusing on is the use of technology, mobilizing healthcare resources, and also implementing military tactics to get us prepared. Similar in the way that people would do war games and prepare soldiers for any war so that they're ready to go into battle or go into active duty at any moment. I don't see any, it seems a bit overzealous. Well, right now, what am I to say about that? Because we've had currently over 2 million people that have been infected with coronavirus. We've had, lots and lots of deaths. We've had significant impact to the way that we live. So what we should be focusing on is what can we do? And in the same way that if you take an active soldier that's on duty and you look at the army and what they do, they work on, preparedness. And I think that's a key factor in moving forward. And once we now start to get to the stage of learning lessons from what's happened, definitely that's a key thing that we need to move forward in. This crisis has shown that, first of all, we're not all working together. Governments are not working with health agencies. Health agencies are not working with from country to country. The WHO is saying one thing, and then we've got people in the spotlight challenging that. So it's definitely shown the weaknesses in the current healthcare system that we have. It's not working. It really isn't working. And when you add an already stressed out health system and you add an epidemic to that, it's like somebody lighting the flame and letting the fireworks go off. So if what we need to do is now to focus on preparedness, and we need to take tactics from the military or from other industries, then that's what we need to do. Simple.
Part of the score is germs 1, people 0.
So germs 1, people 0. For me right now, it feels like germs 1,000 and people 0. We need to change. We need to change the scorecard.
We need lots of advanced R&D in areas of vaccines and diagnostics. There are some big breakthroughs, like adeno-associated virus, that could work very, very quickly. Now, I don't have an exact budget for what this would cost, but I'm quite sure it's very modest compared to the potential harm.
Okay.
The World Bank estimates that if we have a worldwide flu epidemic, global wealth will go down by over $3 trillion, and we'd have millions and millions of deaths. These investments offer significant benefits beyond just being ready for the epidemic. The primary health care, the R&D, those things would reduce global health equity and make the world more just as well as more safe. So I think this should absolutely be a priority. There's no need to panic. We don't have to hoard cans of spaghetti or go down into the basement. But we need to get going because time is not on our side. In fact, if there's one positive thing that can come out of the Ebola epidemic, it's that it can serve as an early warning, a wake-up call to get ready. If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic. Thank you.
Okay. So I've watched the full clip, and here are my thoughts. I pretty much agree with what Bill Gates has said. Obviously, I'm saying it now from a point in the future, having seen and witnessed the devastation that coronavirus is doing. So he's not really preaching or having to convince me over to his side. I think definitely we have seen how unprepared that we are. And despite the fact that at least in the last 20 years, we've had several minor flare-ups, things like SARS, swine flu, Ebola, MERS, just to name a few, we've never really gotten our acts together. And we've left it almost too late. Now we're paying the consequences of being complacent individually amongst ourselves, but then also our governments and health agencies seem to have let us down. And right now, it's, we're now having to cope with doing things individually. We're staying at home, we're social distancing, but we really need to look at this and analyze what are the issues that has cropped up. I'm not really interested or engaged with the whole bioterrorism aspect, which some people might want to kind of talk about, because for me, that is a non-issue. The issue is what's going on right now. Right now, whether it's man-made or natural, we're in the middle of a war, and we need to start organizing our resources into fighting this war, rather than saying, well, this person did it or that person did it, or it came from China, or it came from the West, or it came from some man in a secret laboratory. That, for me, as a medic, it's irrelevant. For right now, it is. I think once the dust clears and everybody, we put this in the rear view mirror, we can then start going through the analysis and the investigations, figure out where it all came from. Right now, we need to be doing what we need to do to get this behind us. And that means we need to start investing in our healthcare, governments, and the whole crisis that's come out from all the testing and the lack of testing. It's just such a scandal. And then when you think of my colleagues in hospitals who are working, doctors, nurses, health professionals who don't have protection. So you're going in and you don't even know if you're going to get adequate equipment. So how are you supposed to treat people? To me, those are much more important things for me right now than what's going on in terms of whether this is man-made. Personally, though, if I was to comment on that, I don't think it's man-made. And unless some evidence comes out or some information comes out, and believe you me, it always does, okay? Unless something comes out that then challenges that, I am going to stick to my opinion and say that this is a genetic mutation. And that's based on the current studies of the genetic composition of coronavirus, and also knowing what's happened in the past. This isn't the first time, guys. We've had the Spanish flu, which Bill Gates referenced in his talk, which was Over a century ago, we've had the bubonic plague, and this was all happening long before man had access to technology. So it's much more likely that every so often there happens to be a tweak or a freak of nature or some kind of weird coincidence, and a new virus evolves and is born. And the main issue is that this one is doing a lot of destructive damage, but the actual background and the sequence of events that led to it coming out is not something that's new. So that's really what I have to say about the bioterrorism aspect of it. I really hope that me talking a little bit about it today has kind of shed some light, at least from a health professional's point of view. And again, I just hope that you guys are keeping safe and keeping sane and just trying to keep as positive as much as possible. I've seen lots of people coming in who don't have coronavirus, but they are absolutely petrified. People having panic, anxiety, and they're having physical health symptoms because they're so worried about what's going on. I don't want that to be you. And I do believe, despite how negative things seem at the moment, that we will come out of this. All you can is to do what you can. Stay safe, stay sane, look after your loved ones and reach out to them, and I'm sure that we will beat this. If you had any comments about the video or any theories that I haven't heard or want to challenge me on what I've said, then by all means, have at it. Let me know what you think and post the comments below. And like I said before, if you're new to my channel and want to consider or are thinking of subscribing, then go ahead. Click that button and click the notification so you know when my next videos are up. Like I said before, and as I will continue to say, stay safe, guys. We will beat this, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.